this is essentially a graphical table of content. So every single graphic icon we see on this picture, when you go to the home of the framework, you can click on and it will launch a guidance article. So it just makes it really visual and an easier way to kind of find that information that you're after. So let's dig in. What is the first of the key themes that's changed? The first is strengthening the foundation with business agility. So if we look at the big picture, you'll see that there's a nice red box. So it's really that foundational piece right at the bottom of the big picture. But there's also been some adds in the area of business agility. So starting off with the business agility value stream. So that's now visualized on the big picture. Business agility is basically the ability to compete and thrive in the digital age by quickly responding to market changes and emerging opportunities with innovative digitally enabled business solutions. So how do we achieve that aim? We deliver it through the business agility value stream. So you can see it describes that process to attain that vision. So we start with sensing an opportunity in the market, and then we're going to fund some MVP. We're going to organize around the value. So in other words, we're going to stand up some cross-functional agile teams, and from a safe perspective, some teams of agile teams. We're going to connect with the customer because that's ultimately what it's about. We've got to exceed those customer expectations. We're going to deliver that MVP. We're going to test those assumptions to make sure we're actually on the right track. And then based on the information, we're going to pivot or we're going to persevere. We're going to stay the course. We're going to keep funding. We're going to keep building out the solution. Or maybe we've learned that we've kind of not quite where we need to be from a customer standpoint, and we might pivot around that. We're going to continue to go through this process. We're going to deliver value continuously, and then ultimately we're going to learn and adapt. So this describes that high level kind of flow from sensing that original opportunity and actually bringing it to life. Now at the foundation, we've made some changes as well. So SAFE is comprised of 7 core competencies. One of those, and they're actually on the big picture, they're the circles that we can see. And so one of the changes in 6.0 is this continuous learning culture. This was always one of the 7 core competencies, but it tended to be a little bit off to the side, and it really is core to what we do, this notion of always learning and always improving. And so now this continuous learning culture has been brought into the foundation of SAFE, as we can see. Other things on the foundation is an update to the SAFE Lean Agile mindset. At the end of the day, SAFE is a Lean Agile framework. Where does it get its Lean influence from? It used to be the House of Lean. If you have done a SAFE training before and you're familiar with that, we've actually retired the House of Lean in 6.0. That doesn't mean that we've retired the ideas behind the House of Lean, but we've, I guess, helped to focus them more. And so the lean thinking is really encapsulated in these lean thinking principles that we can see on the left side of the slide. Where does SAFE get its Agile influence from? Well, of course, that's from the Agile manifestos. Nothing's changed there. That was released in February 2001 and still continues to drive the mindset behind agility today. SAFE has 4 core values. It always had 4 core values, but there's been some changes there. In 6.0, 2 of the core values have been dropped. One of those is built-in quality. That certainly does not mean that built-in quality is not important. In fact, it's more important than ever, and we're going to come back to that a little bit later in this presentation. But because built-in quality is built so much into the framework, it felt a little overkill to keep it as a core value. The other value that has been retired or moved, I should say, is that of program execution. Again, there's so much guidance in the framework around program execution that it felt like it was less necessary to keep it as one of the core values. But rather what has happened is 2 of the pillars in the House of Lean, which has now been retired, have actually been elevated to be 2 of the core values. So alignment and transparency were always there, and the 2 new core values are respect for people, which is so important, and this notion of relentless improvement. SAFE principle number 6 has changed, or more specifically, it's been enhanced. Principle number 6 was always about flow. It was kind of awkwardly named before. The name was a literal kind of description of 3 flow enablers, which again, we'll talk a little bit more about later. But now they've made it a lot clearer. The idea of principle 6 is to make value flow without interruptions. And that is ultimately what it's about. The implementation roadmap has had some updates as well. Still fundamentally the same, but there's been some tweaks with some learning along the way. The first is that the starting point of the transformational journey is not waterfall or ad hoc, because we've realized that companies can start in a whole variety of different places when they decide to embark on a SAFe transformation. The second is the inclusion of the SAFe executive workshop. Very often I've run that workshop as part of a transformation, or at least a customized version of that workshop. So now it's just been sort of added there, so it makes it a little bit more visual in the roadmap. It's also included leading in the digital age. So there's an excellent new couple of courses that fall under the banner of leading in the digital age. One of those courses is called Leading by Example, and the other is called Accelerating Change Leadership. These aren't your traditional 2-day certified courses. They're actually quite different in structure. They're targeted at leadership, and they're run for a 2-hour session once a week over a 5-week period. So very pragmatically focused, excellent courses to do. So now that's being visualized on the implementation roadmap. Organizing around value has now been renamed to Identify Arts and Value Streams, which is effectively what we did at that particular point in the implementation roadmap. The SAFe Value Stream and Art Identification Workshop, which was always run, has now been visualized in the implementation roadmap. There's been a slight tweak to the naming of enhancing the portfolio. It used to be called extending to the portfolio. Why do we make the change? Well, because once upon a time, the pattern tended to be launch agile release trains, and then later on in the transformation is when people would start getting interested in some of the ideas in lean portfolio management. But definitely over the last kind of 18 months to 2 years, there's been a lot more interest in the ideas behind lean portfolio management being implemented earlier in the transformation. So that tweak in the name is a recognition of that. And then finally, Accelerated emphasizes that the transformation journey is never ending. There is no end point. You never agile on this day or SAFe on this day. It's just an ongoing process of learning. So there's some of the tweaks to the implementation roadmap. SAFe practice consultants. You're probably much more familiar with the term SAFe program consultants. So one of the tweaks in 6.0 is the retirement of that legacy term program. And in the case of SAFe program consultants, they're now SAFe practice consultants, which really is a lot more descriptive of the responsibilities of the SPC. And more specifically around that, you'll see on this slide the introduction of what we call responsibility wheels. So there was guidance in the framework around responsibilities, but it tended to be quite heavy in text and a lot of bullet points. So we really wanted to kind of simplify that. And so now, as you'll see in a couple of slides as well, the introduction of these responsibility wheels really calls out those top 5 or 6 responsibilities of each of the key role. So if we look at a SAFe practice consultant, what are they ultimately responsible for? Well, embodying a lean agile mindset, obviously, leading the change to lean, to agile, to SAFe, implementing SAFe itself, coaching flow. Now we're definitely going to come back to this concept of flow. This is one of my favorite additions in 6.0, and ultimately accelerating business agility. So it just makes it much crisper and much more visual as to what those responsibilities are. And so that's a high-level overview of the first of the 6 themes that have changed in 6.0. Let's jump into number 2, which is about empowering teams and clarifying responsibilities. So as we were just talking about these responsibility wheels, this treatment has been done for all of the roles in the framework. So whether you're an Epic owner, business owner, release train engineer, now all of the role articles have been rewritten. In fact, every article has been touched at least to some degree, and many articles have been completely rewritten. So there really is a lot of changes under the hood. But either way, there's been these responsibility wheels added, which is great. In fact, the Agile Release Train itself has a responsibility wheel. So what is that team of Agile teams ultimately responsible for? Why are we bringing these teams of teams together? Well, first and foremost, they've got to connect with the customer, right? If we're not connecting with the customer, if we're not delighting our customer, we're not going to be in business very long. So we've got to be laser focused on the needs of our customer. An Agile Release Train is ultimately responsible for planning their work because they're an empowered teams of teams. They're responsible for delivering value early and often. They're responsible for getting feedback, getting that learning and iterating and taking that into all those improvements into the solution that we ultimately build, and then ultimately improving relentlessly. Even if we're on our A game, there is always the opportunity to improve and get better. So they're the high-level overview of the responsibilities of the Agile release train. If we focus on one in particular, the Scrum Master and the Team Coach. So you'll notice firstly the addition of the term Team Coach. What we tend to see in the field is, teams that use Scrum are very comfortable with the role of the Scrum Master. But if you're not necessarily, applying Scrum or using some other kind of framework, or you're, more in the business space, perhaps out of technology, Team Coach tends to resonate a lot more. So it's really, we don't want to be overly prescriptive in what you call these roles. It's really the responsibilities that are more important than the name. So that's why Team Coach has been introduced there. But if we do look at the responsibility of Scrum Master, we see things like improving our performance, improving flow. So coming back to this idea of flow that's really been enhanced in the framework. Another thing that's been added in this theme number 2 is the idea of key collaborations. And so everyone knows that in Agile, it's not a solo, solitary game, it's a team sport. We are regularly collaborating with everyone around us. And so again, having these nice, simple visual indicators for these key roles, who are they ultimately collaborating with? And that is theme number 2. So let's move on to my favorite theme number 3, accelerating value flow. And you'll see here where the changes, there's been change in the SAFe principle, and we're starting to talk about flow specifically at the team level, at the Agile release train level, solution train and the portfolio level as well. So thinking more about flow, it's become apparent that there's common properties that exist in every flow-based system. And that's ultimately what we're looking at on this slide. So there's 8 properties of a flow-based system. So for example, so I guess I should take a step back first. Why are we even talking about flow-based systems? The reason why we're talking about that is because that's what SAFe is. SAFe is a flow-based system. In SAFe, we don't deliver projects that are separate containers, separate funding with different start and end dates. We're constantly seeking to flow value out to our consumer. From a SAFe point of view, that value is described in terms of epics and features and stories, but ultimately we're uncovering this value and we're delivering it along the way. And so if we really take a step back and say, well, what are the properties of a flow-based system? Firstly, we can see that there's work in process. There's always lots of things to be done, and we're always in the process of building things. 2, there's bottlenecks in our system. Why do we care about that? Because obviously we want to minimize those bottlenecks, because bottlenecks inhibit our delivery of value to our customer. 3, handoffs. There's handoffs between either different people or different teams. Handoffs can slow things down, have information gaps. 4, there's feedback loops that go on, etc., etc. So these 8 properties are key to flow-based systems. And once we understand what those properties are, then we can start to identify some accelerators, some things that it can help us deal with these properties. And in SAFe, there has always been 3 flow accelerators described, and they were always described in principle number 6 of the SAFe principles. If you've done any SAFe training before, you'll recognize number 1, visualize and limit WIP, was one of those accelerators. Number 5 is work in smaller batches. That was another one we've talked a lot about. And principle number 6, reduce queue length. But now we've added 5 additional flow accelerators that can help us address some of these issues. For example, addressing bottlenecks, minimizing handoffs and dependencies, optimizing time in the zone. So in other words, minimizing interruptions so we can allow our people and our teams just to focus and get work done. So these are some really powerful ideas that are very practical things that we can implement. The other thing to note is that these accelerators are actually applied differently depending on what level of the system that you're talking about. So for example, if you're looking to implement flow within a team, some of these accelerators are going to be more influential and have more of an impact than potentially if you're looking at optimizing flow of epics through our portfolio. And so those red boxes there are highlighting that there's a unique guidance article at every level of SAFE, which digs right into those 8 and really talks about how they can specifically help each level of our system. SAFE Team Kanban, so the guidance in the framework around Kanban has been improved. The idea that a team can choose its own team-based agile framework has always been there. Teams could run Scrum, they could run Kanban, they could run some other flow-based framework at the team level. So there's nothing new there, but we've definitely enhanced the Kanban guidance in the framework. Safe Scrum is another change in 6.0. So with Safe Scrum, we used to refer to Safe XP. If you're familiar with that term, XP stands for Extreme Programming. So if you are a technical team, we always talked about using Scrum, but also applying some of the ideas that are contained within XP. And now we refer to it as Safe Scrum. That certainly doesn't mean that we've retired the ideas of XP. In fact, they're still as powerful today as they have always been. It's just that we've wrapped those ideas of XP into more of the built-in quality articles. And the Safe Scrum focus more on not just team-level Scrum, which everyone's pretty familiar with, but at the end of the day, this is about scale. This is about a team of agile teams. So what do Scrum teams need to do in addition to what they would normally do at the team level to effectively integrate and align with all the other teams on the train? And that's really what Safe Scrum is speaking to. Yes, Kanban, so I've talked about that. We've got extended guidance in there, so definitely encourage people to look into that if you're using Kanban within your context. And this is where we talk about built-in quality. So built-in quality has always been absolutely key to what we talk about. And up until 6.0, we have always talked about some generic qualities of some generic built-in qualities that apply to both business teams and technical teams. So for example, ideas like automation, ideas like flow. Doesn't matter whether you're a technical team, doesn't matter whether you're a business team, these ideas are going to help you either way. And so in 6.0, we've taken that idea one step further. And absolutely, there's still basic agile quality of practices that can be applied to all domains. But if we look a little bit deeper in each of the domains, there are some practices that are more specific to that domain. So for example, if you're a business area, as opposed to a software team, as opposed to a hardware team, as opposed to a team that's building cyber physical systems, then there are going to be some differences in these domains. And this graphic does a really nice job of kind of explaining how you would kind of add these pieces to work out what are the built-in quality steps that you should really focus on, depending on the domain that you're dealing with. Value stream management, that has now been elevated onto the big picture as well. So what is value stream management? It's a leadership and technical discipline that enables the maximum flow of business value through the end-to-end solution delivery of the life cycle. So again, the flow of value has always been integral to SAFE, but now it's been encapsulated in that article and made more visible. One other idea, just before I hand over to Yusuf, is the idea of the Value Management Office has been introduced. So I guess this is like the Agile PMO, but we're seeing the new term kind of Value Management Office emerging. So it's not the, getting rid of our PMO, it's really the reimagining of our PMO and what can they do to enable us within our organizations to get the most out of our lean agile ways. And so, yeah, some more guidance around the VMO is in the framework. And that is a very high-level walkthrough of the first 3 themes in 6.0. I'm going to hand over to Yusuf, who's going to talk us through the next 3.
Thanks, James. So if I ask this group, what do you feel are characteristics of an organization that have fully transformed using SAFE or not? Would one of them possibly be that they've extended their agility, their digital transformation out of IT and through across the entire organization into business? Wouldn't that be one characteristic? If anyone says no, feel free to put in the chat. But SAFE feels it is. Data has shown that it is. Because why? Because over the years, we're not just doing agility for IT. It often starts in the teams, but We want to roll it out to across the business, which means everybody can do a Kanban board. I have one right here about Kanban about vacation. What are we doing? Yeah. So SAFE has done that. We've seen time and time again that businesses and organizations and individuals who are really successful at agile transformations, at scaling their agility, they've pushed it across, and the entire organization has started to adopt it in various ways. And that's what SAFE 6 is really focusing on, enhancing the business agility with SAFE across the framework. So if we jump in the next slide, James, we can start to see how SAFE is doing that. We're talking about business-enabled arts. Think about it this way. In previous versions of SAFE, we talked about agile release trains. There's an operational value stream in that release train. There's a development value stream in that release train. And we focus on the value streams being a product. Well, guess what? Don't business functions have more than one product or parts of a product that can all be part of an art? And multiple arts can be part of a business-enabled art, which means we're focusing on the customer. We're focusing on the business of getting things done. Yeah, it's not a high level in the clouds idea. We're actually delivering with the framework. So in the business enabled art, we're talking about all those things, critical business functions, from research to marketing, business processes, enablement. Those are all part of the operational value stream, and multiple streams can be in there. I'll plop an article, a link to the article actually in there, in the chat here. There we go. So I'll pull a few articles as we talk, and they'll lead you through to the actual technical article on SAFE's website. Then we talk about Agile release train itself and the Agile business train itself. That's a further step toward the agility, isn't it? It contains one or more SAFE operational value streams, and all the arts, all the Agile release trains needed to define, build, deploy, and operate and commercialize a complete solution. So as you can see, the SAFE 6 is now really putting the spotlight on business. Getting business done, operationalizing it, commercializing it, and doing it through value streams and total communication. It also talks about an agile executive team, because what's better for leaders to really understand what's going on is if they operate within a kind of Scrum team or an agile team. This means building an exemplar cross-functional agile team of leaders, which means they have their own team coach or Scrum coach, Scrum master if they're doing Scrum, and a product owner. What might they be doing? Building strategic themes, researching new ideas, operationalizing ideas, analyzing things that come from the teams, talking about AI, which we'll talk about in a second. What do we find out from our AI? We're building, also incorporating all parts of an organization as part of this theme is, what about an agile functional department? That's the organization unit that utilizes lean agile methods and SAFE principles to streamline its operations. So we're talking about legal, HR, marketing, so that everyone's speaking the same dialect. If you've been to one of my courses, that's probably the first thing I say is SAFE is a framework, yes, but it's a dialect that we can all speak as part of the organization. So we know how to best streamline what we're doing. And then also talking about in SAFE 6.0, 6.0, yeah, is the combined portfolio, which means it's a scaled agile framework for enterprise portfolio that includes both development and operational value streams that provides clear funding decisions for the agile release trains and the blended set of solutions that we're working on. So we're really talking about getting to that product, going from project to product funding. Yeah. So we'll jump on the next slide, James. We'll get into, yes, pushing it beyond IT. So in the article, it's actually a homepage, so to speak, for pushing it across the organization into risk management, into the finance, and becoming a data-driven company and launching agile release trains. So all of these talk about how it's been done in the real world. We'll push on the next slide. Now, what's the big buzz? AI, big data, cloud. I mean, a lot of us in this call have been working in cloud all the time. We've got Google Drives and iCloud Drives, and all our data is everywhere. And talking about big data in the cloud. And some organizations have massive amounts of information that they're continually processing. And how do we deal with that within a scaled environment? Yeah, it's one thing to be part of a big data team, But when we're scaling agility, it's like going from a fishing boat on a weekend to a cruise ship or an aircraft carrier. All these little moving parts, they have to work together. So that Safe.6.0 is talking about how we roll those in. Let's go to the next slide, James, and we'll jump into our AI. Now, I asked AI the other day how to build a lightsaber. Didn't give me much of an answer. Maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the question should be, how can AI help us streamline our processes? How can it help us discover parts about what we're doing that will help us in a new thing? For instance, scientists right now are able to communicate with a colony of bees, literally, to point them to a new nectar source using AI just the other day. It only happened once. They're not sure exactly how they did it, other than they were using the bee dance that bees do, but it proves that with AI, we can start thinking about things. What does that mean in terms of space travel, perhaps? How do we revolutionize that and incorporate that into building better products for the organization? And then big data is a big portfolio concern. It requires a lot of investment in funding and vision and centralization. Just as we talked about building the architectural runway in previous versions of SAFe, which we still do now, is how do we do the same thing with big data? That's, in a large sense, part of that architectural runway. And how does cloud increase product development speed and agility? So let's jump on the next one, and we'll dive into AI a little bit. I'm going to copy this link and put it in the chat for you. There's an article on SAFe's website just on AI. Dive in there a little bit. How does it can be used, as I mentioned a second ago, to describe a wide range? Maybe it's smart machines. Maybe it's communicating with tiny robots, as those scientists did to talk to bees. Not necessarily talk to them, but help them out. Maybe it's help them guide them away areas that the virus that was killing whole hordes of bees for the last couple of years. How do we help educate them and warn them? It might be bees, it might be space travel, it might be building better products, communicating better with customers. But the guidance in SAFe now really talks about it. How do we incorporate it and help it and allow it to help us as a competitive advantage for the organization? Let's jump on to big data. Who's next? I'll grab a link for you for that article as well. There you go. What are the roles and practices that are required to collect and manage all this stuff, these huge amounts of data? Consistent with SAFe throughout the new version and previous version, it's pulling everyone in the organization in to work together. In the article, in the link I sent you, we're talking about how do we work with the data science and data analysts who are working with AI and deep learning, and how do they roll in? How do we analyze and learn that with data sciences, A/B testing, experimentation? How do we aggregate it with data engineers and transform it and manage it? And how do the systems and solution architects collect and log and sense and monitor throughout? So the organization can incorporate how it deals with big data and responds to it. Yeah. How does it influence us? We'll jump to the next slide. Now we're talking about the cloud. How does that pull in? You'll notice it looks strangely familiar to the value stream network, doesn't it? Yeah. So I'll give you a link to that as well. So you have a link to the article itself. There you go. How do systems migrate from on-prem to cloud? I've been part of those. They can be tricky. How do we incorporate how we stand up systems and horizon systems in the cloud? How to respond to that and update them for infrastructure and operations, for cloud DevOps. You'll notice in the big picture, it's tied to the cloud, to DevOps now, and cloud for AI. So the SAFe 6.0 is helping us in the guidance to deal with that. And how do Agile teams work with it? Yeah, great, thank you. And then so the last one here, second to last really, is OKRs and measure and grow. Mr. Barry asked about other new metrics. I don't know if there's so much new. Yeah, if you read my blog, I talk a lot about flow metrics. Kirsten talks about a lot about flow metrics, and that's what we're really talking about with the new guidance as well. Is you'll notice that measure and grow is now at the lower left-hand corner, or right-hand corner, sorry, looking backwards. And pushing those metrics in terms of objectives and key results as we go through it. So the Mixer article has formally been renamed Measure and Grow. It's an approach for enterprises to use those flow metrics toward business agility. Understanding what those flow metrics mean, just lead time, flow load, flow distribution, all those things. What does it mean when our velocity goes up or down as an organization? What does it mean to measure our flow distribution? All those things help business and IT communicate together. How can we work and balance our backlogs? In this article, we see in every portion of the framework, from portfolio to full to teams, all are talking about measure and grow their flow. There's 3 dimensions here: competency, their flow, and our outcomes. So OKRs in general help us get away from just talking about what are outputs, what are we just going to deliver these little things, to what is the outcome we want, and then how are we going to work key results that and measure it. And we still have KPIs. How efficient organization being, how proficient organization in the practices that enable business agility. Are we adding meetings, or are we just focusing on the meetings that we need? Next slide, James. And there's 3 primary use cases for that. We're going to talk a little bit about them: our strategic themes, epic OKRs, and transforming organization OKRs. So pop to the next one. I'll give you a link while James switches slides there. Give you a link to the OKRs article. There you go. In each one, we're talking about portfolio strategic themes. The first use case is to help strategic alignment. What are the big goals of an organization? Oftentimes, those strategic themes don't really impact a portfolio equally or teams. But as you'll see in this image, the use case is, how is an OKR written so that each successive and progressive level influences or echoes the other? How do the team's OKRs reflect what they're doing and their outcome they want? That's going to help us achieve the OKRs from the portfolio and strategic level. And our next slide, we're going to talk about the epic hypothesis. And for me, this really cleans up the whole epic hypothesis statement template from several years ago up to current, because now we can literally, in the second stage, once we've identified what it is, we're looking at what the business outcomes are. It's not only a hypothesis, but what are the real business outcomes we want at the various levels? It can also be essential to measure, anticipate what the epic hypothesis mean, and really identify the MVP and get fast feedback so we know whether to pivot or continue. The last use case is, how do we transform organization? What is it we're trying to do here, really? Is it just building the epic hypothesis statement or strategic themes? No. We're trying to apply OKRs to the safe transformation of the organization. So it almost forces early discussion around expected benefits. It's a common mistake that lean is about saving time or money and labor. And no, it's about being more and more efficient so we can focus on the things that help other people, that deliver products and benefit the organization as well as our customers. It generates alignment. These OKRs generate alignment and transparency, as we previously described, and also creates commitment to the journey across the organization. So what are those last cool things that are in the new upgrade? Well, safe backlogs, highlight those better. The spanning palette, James mentioned a little bit earlier, we'll look at it again here in a little bit. Enterprise solution delivery, and some terminology changes. So for those of you who like to memorize things, I've actually made it a little bit easier for you. All right, so what are the new things? All safe backlogs are managed with Kanban, which we kind of already knew. If you've taken a safe course, you have seen those things, but now we're calling it out, aren't we? Each one is highlighted extra big in the big picture. They removed the vertical Kanban label from all the backlogs to reduce clutter. It's getting a little cluttered there. Backlog state was replaced with ready. So if anybody's working on a team, yes, we have a backlog in the backlog deal, and that was treated as the ready state in our Kanban board. But what do we really want to call it? Ready. It's ready to work on. That also tips the hat to working on our definitions of ready and done. How can it be ready to be in that column? What's our policy for that? Yeah. And for Scrum, a separate Kanban system is there managed to manage the iteration backlog and uses iteration backlog as its label in that ready state. Okay. Next slide. What we got here? The spelling palette changes. Guess what? We just talked about OKRs. They're right there at the top. Very, very, very big topic. Milestones icon was removed, actually. It hasn't gone away. It's just removed and is merged into the new roadmap article. We've added AI, as you can see, and Lean UX, you might remember, it's way down at the bottom, but now we've moved it up to customer centricity and design thinking because it's more closely related to that for much of the practice in the wild. And the measurable growth article combines the content from the previous metrics and the new metrics. You've got a link there I sent you in the chat, so feel free to read that. Actually, flow metrics are a really great topic and really generate a lot of conversations across the organization. So next slide. So now with enterprise solution delivery, we're talking about a new pre-plan describes that solution trade activity necessary to prepare the art. What do we need to build ahead of time? Just in time for the teams to consume it and tell us how to make the infrastructure even better. Using set-based design, that's not going away. It's based on experience from customer feedback. So a lot of the things that went into this new version are really based on customer feedback, on studies from Save customers, and Scaled Agile Framework rolled a lot of those into this, which is really great. I often say that they're listening, so give me your feedback during a course, and here you go. Things are coming out. Coordinate and deliver is replaced by post-PI planning. That update describes the practices necessary to deliver large solutions across multiple arts. So you have to coordinate all those in a solution train. Now on to our memorization slides. Just kidding. It's pretty easy. Next slide. It's gotten a little simpler, actually. It's actually easier to say now because usually program board, program backlog, but now almost everything's program is changed to art. To be very specific, we're talking about the Agile Release Train backlog. We're talking about from the Agile Program Management Office. Now we're talking about Value Management Office. As James said, we're really talking about delivering value. So VMO is helping coordinate that discussion in all our value streams and what that value looks like across the board. James also mentioned that one of our themes was the titles changed from Safe Program Consultant to Practice Consultant, which is really great for a lot of practitioners like myself. Not really managing consulting programs necessarily, but the actual practice and the flow of value across the organization. And then the last couple of slides, we're going to go a little more terminology. Solution trains have gotten a little bit easier instead of solution board, epic, etc. We're talking it's a solution train planning board. Solution train epic. So now it's very specific. And then some of the last ones, daily stand-ups kind of changed to team sync. Old geezers like me probably will still call it daily scrum, sorry. Sometimes. Lean systems and solution engineering, lean systems and engineering, so it's easier to say. Scrum of Scrums is now the coach sync to kind of nod to the team coach title. And then Scrum XP is Safe Scrum. So there we are. Questions?
There are some questions in the chat. Do you want to read it? Do you?
Sure. So everybody can maybe folks aren't looking at their screen.
From Anthony Little, what does the AI guidance add to the goals of SAFE?
What it does is it adds, where's the place in it? It's still so new. People who are using it and are using the Scaled Agile Framework gave some feedback, and it's more about not telling people how to do AI or big data or cloud. It's where does it fall within the framework itself in terms of positioning. If you look at the article itself, I used to have it open. It's really talking about what are all the processes required, how do we fit it in with our cadences, etc. A lot more information there in the last 12 minutes I could probably get into though. But it's definitely not there to tell folks how to use AI. It's how it can be rolled in synchronization with the framework itself. Okay.
I can see the question from Anthony. Does the written guidance amp up the emphasis on flow? The answer is absolutely. It's always been a large emphasis on flow, and they've really doubled down. I think, every single course I run, I always poll everyone to go, what are those key insights that you took away from the course? And without a doubt, flow is always up there in the top 3. And so I know that this deeper guidance around flow is really going to resonate with people.
James, wasn't the first thing when you look at the new roadmap and the new big picture, doesn't it just, we talked about in classes before, like it's all about flow between the different levels, but now you really can just look at it.
Yeah. Absolutely, it's right there.
Because one of the observations that I've seen around implementation has been people getting a handle on things. They lost that sense. Well, they never really had it, but they didn't develop a sense of flow. And we know how profoundly powerful it is. And so I was curious about going, is there in the update, is it going, guys, just a reminder, if you're not flowing, you're missing the point?
Yeah, that is true. Yes. And that message was, it tried to get across with all the synchronization, the closed loop systems and feedback and all that kind of stuff. But it's really pointed out now, isn't it? The big picture.
What other questions have people got?
There is another one from Timpy. Do you actually, Timpy, want to actually ask the question directly?
Hi, yes. Hi guys, it's George here. Hi Dave, nice hat. Again, mate. Yeah, so my question is just with the safe stuff that you've shown, and again, even with the AI and safe, is there any white papers or sample projects, case studies that have been done? Because yeah, it's pretty awesome to do the work, but I really like the idea where, yeah, you've got to get it into the org, but the case studies in some ways help, I think, make it palatable as opposed to doing it on the fly. Yeah, so that's where my question's coming from.
I read your question, and I was actually sitting here trying to find that article that I saw on it. There's several. I'm drawing a blank at the moment. If you run into the customers and stories, case studies on the SAFE website, I'm pretty sure I saw a study on AI in there, or a paper. I just can't find it at the moment. It's like when flipping through a magazine, like, I knew I saw it somewhere. Those are out there. If you go to the AI article in the link that I put in there, at the bottom, there's several resources, one including from Google. That's more of a how-to, but yes, there is some stuff out there for you.
Thanks.
Yep. And if you find more, let us know, because I feel the same way.
Yeah, because I've been doing this for a while, and like, for example, ServiceNow, their product, their branding it's about the customer, and they always have their customer stories published, and you can read about them, whatever, and then whoever in your org can say, oh yeah, that applies to me. But yeah, it'll be really good if the methodologies that we're trying to do can do that, because as technology people, we're being asked to talk to the business, but to, how do you say, dumb down our language sometimes takes away from our technical skill set. And also people can sometimes put up a wall and say, oh, you sound too technical, even though we're just using non-technical words. But if they can see that someone else has done what we're trying to establish, and like especially if it's run by a business person, yeah, it actually adds so much more weight and helps the collaboration.
It does. If you don't find anything, you can always reach out to Scaled Agile Inc. themselves and hook up someone. They'll find somebody for you, right? But yeah, the idea of the framework should never replace or have the thought that it's telling us how to do things. It's only giving us guidance on how to roll those things into the organizational transformation and scaling the agility, right? The framework never presumes to tell anybody how to do Scrum necessarily or how to do AI. It's merely saying, hey, this is how we can incorporate it, how we can catapult it. It can help us catapult using AI within our scale agility practice. Someone asked about why is Minoru Saito, thank you for that question. Why is the portfolio Kanban gone from the big picture, only team Kanban remains? It hasn't gone away. I put the link to the portfolio backlog article in the chat. If you scroll down a little bit in there, the Kanban's still there. It's still there. I mean, that's just be a film picture. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, that's really key to SAFE. It's always been about interlocking Kanbans, from portfolio down to solution, if you've got that level implemented, down to essential, down to team. So yeah, that notion is certainly in there.
For sure.
Nice. What other questions? So let me ask you folks a question. Like, Do you like the ideas that are in 6.0? Did any of those themes kind of resonate with you?
Going hard on flow, I thought was really good.
Yeah. Fantastic. Definitely my favorite as well. Did any others resonate with people?
Well, some of the definition changes probably are going to be a bit difficult to stomach because we're used to, like, for example, program increment for PI and things like that. Now you're calling it planning interval. And then similarly for Scrum, you're calling it team sync. Yeah, things like that. Yeah.
I think that's a great point. There's always challenges with language, particularly when we get used to it. I think what makes it a little bit easier is they've kept the same abbreviations. So it is planning interval, but it's still called a PI, right? It is a safe practice consultant, but it's still an SPC. So I think probably those abbreviations will probably pay even more emphasis than before. So it's not a hugely different change in that regard. I think when it comes to the term like program, to me personally, I've always found program really confusing. So I've taught so many people in classes, and whenever I used to talk about the program Kanban, I'd have to translate it and say, oh, I just mean the art, the train, like you've got to, and so now that it's just a recognition of that, let's just call it what it is. It is the art backlog, right? So things like that.
Yep. I think too, it's confusing for folks who would not fully transition to SAFe, right? They still had programs, and we're getting really confused with clients about, well, here's our program work, but is that the same as our Agile release stream work, and where does it differ, and those kind of things. So now it's much clearer and clearer to transition, I think. Anthony was asking about the implementation roadmap. Is it still a series based on Kotter's 8 steps, lean change management, etc.? And I answered absolutely. It's still there. Kotter's a huge influence on SAFe for good reason. And then also, as James mentioned earlier, the 2 classes offered with the enterprise subscription, accelerating change leadership and leading by example, both heavily influenced by Kotter, not only Kotter, but also Daniel Goleman, his book, Working with Emotional Intelligence. Brilliant courses.
Yeah, so in fact, the accelerating change leadership was built with Kotter.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if we summarize the changes largely in 6.0, really what's happened, it's a deepening of the focus of business agility. Business agility was always the goal of SAFe since 5.0, and now it goes deeper with the business value stream. It's a tightening up and an improvement of the values and principles, because at the end of the day, SAFe is a values and principles-led framework. It's not just a process framework at all. It's much more about the mindset. So that's being tightened in there. Flow has resonated so strongly, so they've doubled down on flow and really thought it through and made that more practical. People are always asking for, can you just tell me what is the responsibility of the Scrum Master or the system architect or whatever? So now they're much crisper with those responsibility wheels. Tightening up of the language, as we've talked about as well. Improvements in the visualization of the big picture so that it's just a little bit more understandable. So these are kind of some of the key areas. And then last but not least, further focus on metrics. Always had a really strong focus on metrics, but now with the inclusion of OKRs means we can measure and really learn from that. So yeah, in aggregate, there's a lot of changes, and it's pretty much touched all areas of the framework. If you're familiar with SAFe, it's not just the framework, it's the community platform, and there's so many assets that come with a community platform, the toolkits and the videos and all of these assets need to be touched as well. All of the courseware has been upgraded, not only to include the new IP, but just really kind of improved the flow and everything as well. And we're pretty excited about the changes.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools that people can really take away and use. So the other tools that will come into the coursework that you see if you're delivering courses or about to take a course are simply the 8 flow accelerators. During a course, people often ask, how do we get this due? We tweak it. Okay. And I often say, well, bring coach in because we want to come in and help you. But you can, but the 8 flow accelerators themselves are literally 8 tools you can take away from a course and go say, okay, these are some things we know that research has proven. If we help do these things, start tweaking them, they will help our flow get better.
I see Dave's question in there. When's the next safe update coming out after 6.0? History
Is it 3 years' time, or what do you think?
Well, if history is a predictor of the future, then it was a 1 year gap between the 5.0 and the 5.1 release.
Yeah.
So there certainly wouldn't be another dot release in under a year, but maybe in a year's time or something. But as I mentioned, those guidance articles are always being updated in the background, and there's always advanced guidance articles. So it's not a, hey, I'll check back in a year. Things are always being updated.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, cool.
Any other questions we can enter? All right, I am conscious of time. We're just about at our time box. I really appreciate everyone joining us today. Just a bit of a shameless plug. We do have two public courses coming up. If you are interested, we've got Leading Safe coming up in May and Implementing Safe in June. Both of those courses are online as well, so people can join from anywhere. And then last is we're hiring as well. So yeah, if you're looking for a change or looking to get involved in an agile consultancy, obviously if you're interested in SAFE, then we're experts in that space, but we do all sorts of things beyond SAFE as well. So if you are interested in exploring careers, I've just popped our website up there, so I encourage you to take a look. And that's it for today. So with all of that, thanks again for everyone joining. I hope you've been able to learn something along the way. If you do have any other questions, then please feel free to reach out to Yusuf or myself at any time. We'd be happy to chat. And with that,
Definitely. Thanks everybody for showing up.